You're listening to Themes and Memes, a different kind of movie review. My name is Adam, and with me here today I have two co-hosts. My regular co-host Aaron from the Age of Transitions, and our good friend Pearse Redmond from Porkins Policy Review. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Good to be here.
It's been a podcast in the making, but I'm glad that we're finally doing it.
Yeah, and tell me about it. We've had a lot of technical problems and actually, logistical problems and then technical problems. So, this has been a mission getting here. But we're going to review not a movie today, but a TV series called Stranger Things. Now, I imagine, a fair few people out there are familiar with this. It's been promoted on the internet pretty heavily over the past month or two, I guess. And it's interesting on a number of different levels. I think. Probably the most interesting part of it is the period that it's set in, so there's a lot of nostalgia going on. But I think the best way to start out here today would be for me to give a brief sort of overview, synopsis, of what the series is about, and a few sort of key, observations. And then I guess we can just kind of bat it back and forth from there. So, so Stranger Things, this is a 2016 TV series. It is a Netflix original. So this is a production that has been basically financed and bought by, Netflix. By I think the story, you've got a couple of, producers and directors called the Duffer Brothers. I don't know a lot about them. I haven't been able to find a lot of information on them. But, they've created this show and they got a contract with Netflix to for them to distribute it, or at least, make it available to their customers. So, as is the case with so many TV shows these days, i.e. the ones that are being put out on places like Netflix and Amazon and that kind of thing, it's all available immediately. So you don't have to tune in every week. You can literally just go and binge watch it whenever you want. But the setting for this particular show is November 1983. It's set in the small town of Porkins, Indiana. And it starts out with us being introduced to a group of children who are, playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I've never played the game Dungeons and Dragons. I was never into that, but I understand it was a very, very popular board game, sort of a role-playing board game from the 80s especially. And so they're having a game, I think it's on a Sunday night, and simultaneously, while this is being shown to us, we go across to the local government facility. Now, this is called the Hawkins Energy Company or something like that, and it's basically run under the
it's a national laboratory run by the DOE.
Yeah, that's right. And at the very beginning, we're not shown exactly what's going on, but something's gone wrong at this facility. So this is a big government facility. Something's gone wrong. Some kind of creature or whatnot has escaped. We then go back to the boys playing their game of Dungeons and Dragons, and during the gameplay, the character of Will Byers makes a move that evokes the Demogorgon, which in this particular game is the demon. It's the Grim Reaper, or what have you, the thing you want to avoid in gameplay. And after they finish up their game, Will Byers heads home on his bike. He passes through, I think, or nearby to this government facility, and has an accident. So he falls off his bike, after which point he is chased home by some kind of creature, which we don't see, but this creature appears to either kill or capture him. Now, this disappearance of Will Byers obviously prompts an investigation. People are asking where he is, and the police get involved. And so the series starts out with his mother, Will Byers' mother, his brother, his friends that he was playing Dungeons and Dragons with, and the local sheriff all embarking on a journey, an investigation into this kind of this government facility, and then exactly what's going on, and we get into a lot of paranormal elements, and very, very strange goings on. Simultaneously, as this starts to happen, a young girl called Elle, or 11, appears on the scene. She is obviously traumatized and confused. She looks she's dressed in a hospital gown. She looks like a patient or a victim or something. She is befriended by Will's friends, who take care of her and protect her, because people are evidently chasing her and trying to find her. And she gradually helps them to understand the fact that Will is not actually dead, that he's actually alive somewhere, and that his disappearance is somehow related to this government facility as is hers, or as is her issue, her problems. Though none of this happens before more locals go missing, and so I guess that's really where the series picks up from. So it essentially follows the progress of this investigation, all the unfolding revelations in regard to what's happening in this facility, and I guess the key questions and devices that carry the series through are what is going on at this facility. What is the purpose and nature of these experiments? Whereabouts is Will Byers? Whereabouts are these other people who have disappeared? And what is the origin of this young girl, Elle? Now, I think a good place to start with on this particular series would be just the issues that we've already discussed, guys. So, the fact that this is a Netflix original, the fact that it's a homage to the sort of the 80s sci-fi, fantasy genre. And the nostalgia that kind of evokes. So, Pearse, I mean,
sure. Well,
you had something to say.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think I like many people did binge watch it with my girlfriend over the course of 48 hours. We watched the first, I think, 4 episodes, and then passed out from exhaustion. We went to work, and then decided. Halfway through work that we should probably, go home after work immediately and then finish off the series, which we did. I mean, the nostalgia thing that's something that we were talking about in our emails and in our previous attempts to record this episode. Which, I just not to get too off topic, but if people really knew the behind the scenes things of how much has gone into this episode and the strange things that have happened while we were trying to record this, it would. That would make for a podcast in and of itself. But getting back to the nostalgia, I think that plays an important role. I think in the first viewing, I have subsequently rewatched the whole series. I rewatched the whole series in a day a few weeks ago. In honor of binge watching in the series, but the nostalgia plays a big role, I think, in definitely in sucking us in. I would say this is probably on the whole issue of Netflix. This is the only really good Netflix original series that's out there right now. I know people like
No House of Cards.
I am a strong believer in the original House of Cards series, the British version. And I full disclosure, I've never given the American version the time of day, but I do know that people like it. But yeah, no, I mean I think you're saying before, Adam, with like D&D. I've never played D&D either, but I did. I played Magic: The Gathering. I played Warcraft. I played World of Warcraft. I am a big fan of A Song of Ice and Fire, the novel series. So. I think even in that sort of, again, of like getting together with your friends and playing fantasy games and things like that definitely kind of pulled me in initially, and made me kind of really feel for these characters in the first like 5 minutes of it, and the nostalgia is interesting on so many levels, on like a marketing gimmick level. On isn't this cool and retro, and the 80s was so awesome. But what's really funny is there's I'm sure we'll get to later. There's very few real references to history in this show. There's a lot about the clothing and some of the language and slang things and the attitudes that certain people have that I guess evoke. I don't even know if they really evoke the 80s or if they evoke 80s films, which is something different. Because there are a few obviously historical things that do pop up in the show, but they're given very little context. So I think that's the lens of nostalgia is always sort of clouding what we really think of something. So apparently, the 80s was just about I guess like synthesizers and
big hair,
and D&D and hideous clothing and things like that. And not some of the other kind of crazy shit that was going on.
Part of the nostalgia is the fact that they have these children as the main characters, and it's a group of children. It's not just one that you follow. It's this group that are buddies, and that was something that was used in all sorts of 1980s films to popular effect. And lots of those films themselves have this powerful nostalgic quality to them, and people love them, like the Goonies, of course, and you got all the Brat Pack movies. People still love these movies. So this series kind of piggybacks on that in just having the main characters be a group of children. So I think that's definitely happening too, and worthy of note.
Yeah, that is, again, it's the opening scene of maybe the second scene. I'm not sure which comes first, but the scene that we're familiarized with immediately is this, the scene of children. And so, again, like you say, we've got references to the Goonies. I think E.T. coming through pretty clearly there.
Mm-hmm.
They've got their BMX bikes.
Stand by
and
me.
You've also got, that too. You've also got the fact that these kids are holding or sort of protecting and taking care of this girl, Elle. So she kind of represents E.T. in a way, because she's, there's a scene where she's dressed up as she has a wig on and a dress on, and they're sort of hiding her from the parents and all this kind of stuff. So
she's got the paranormal powers.
Paranormal powers, exactly. So it's loaded with these references, very, very clear, obvious references to this kind of 80s sci-fi fantasy genre, kind of a la, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas. So we see a little dashes of the Never-Ending Story, Labyrinth, and even some other more recent films as well. For example, like the film Super 8 by J.J. Abrams. I think this is about 5 years old. If you're familiar with that film, I mean, that itself was a tribute to films like E.T., a darker sort of, rendition of like the E.T. story, essentially. And so, this is kind of paying homage to that, which itself was paying homage to something else. So it's kind of
I was struck by some of the, I know like Jay Dyer talked about the sort of like nerds are cool, or like nerd culture has become really, super hip and stuff. But I was actually surprised at some of the more, maybe what you'd say, like more obscure things like that. Like so much of Eleven's behavior and her escape scene mimics Akira, the film and the comic book series as well. Down to that they're about children with psychic powers, and they all have a number. The way that Elle kills the two guards is like identical to a scene in the film Akira, and which I think is like, again, one of those sort of trying to hook in actual nerds, myself included, and even more so. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Buffy at all, but there's a big kind of Buffy the Vampire Slayer vibe to the whole show. A big part of Buffy is the Hellmouth, which is this like portal to an alternate dimension that is open. And then there's a lot with in Buffy, they're always like the best seasons of Buffy are when it's like the whole gang at the house, battling and hanging out. And they also play D&D a lot in Buffy. So that sort of hooked me in, and kind of, not even in a nostalgia way, but just sort of engaged me, and in a way that I haven't seen with another TV show. Almost on a level where I wasn't, I knew I was hooked in this like weird, again, it's like this drug with some of these binge shows, but this one especially. And then it was only, halfway through that I realized, oh, this is exactly like Buffy, or, this is like some of the best seasons of Buffy. So, that was just, just me, I guess showing quite how nerdy I can get on
Yeah. It's definitely like the X-Files for sure as well.
Oh,
definitely very much like the X-Files. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of that coming through. I think it's safe to say that the series is really a I think basically just a montage of 80s pop culture references. You know, it's kind of, yeah, it's just all of these elements from all these other films, and this kind of established genre of film, just all thrown in together, and not badly. I mean, you know, it's not like a hodgepodge mixed bag of this sort of disconnected, you know, 80s references or anything like that. But I think the producers and directors of the show have gone to lengths to include as much nostalgia and as many pop cultural references from that period as possible.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
you know,
for
it's
sure.
funny. We were saying before, Adam, like on second viewing, you don't even notice it. It's like almost like
consistent. It's true. Well, I think. Sorry, I was going to say. I think the and people who have seen the show will be well familiar with this, because I've seen this talked about in a number of reviews and things like that. Is that the opening sequence, so the opening credits, etc., are probably the most kind of stylized aspect of the series, because they feature this these particular graphics which are very, very reminiscent of like Poltergeist or perhaps Labyrinth or something like that, from the early 80s, and this analog synth music and all this kind of stuff. And there's a hell of a lot of nostalgia coming through in just those opening credits. I mean, those were raved about, and quite simply irresistible.
Oh yeah.
Once you see them, you got to keep watching. But again, like Pearse, you were saying, it's once you get past the opening credits and into the thick of the actual episode, it starts to. Yeah, I mean, I guess it wears off in a way. It becomes very, very normal. I mean, you're not really conscious of the fact that you were watching a kind of a period piece, as it were. If I guess the music, the occasional bit of music, is really the only thing. Or maybe the cars. The cars, the music, and a few.
Yeah,
the clothing.
Vehicles do it. Yeah.
I mean, other than that, you could transpose this into 2016 and nobody would notice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. What I just thought of is one of the things about those 80s movies. I'm thinking about E.T. for sure, but I feel like that's when films really started beginning portraying governments and these three-letter government agencies as evil. You know what I mean? That's the guys who came and took ET and were doing all the bad stuff to him. That they were feds, right? And then in this series, you've got the shadowy National Laboratory run by the Department of Energy, and you've got other people from other agencies that you only have to guess who they may even be. They don't even really say, but they're there too. They're obviously federal employees, but it's got that going. So, and again, that for me definitely evoked the X-Files too. So
there are a lot of as you say, and like, real world tie-ins and references to, broader conspiracy culture, sort of a la the X-Files. So, as you say, we've got this Department of Energy, facility, and which it appears to be something like a Department of Defense and CIA kind of joint program, possibly, involving other agencies. But I mean, it is essentially revealed, I think, by the third episode that this is in fact MK Ultra that's going on. They make a very clear reference to MK Ultra. And so if you're talking MK Ultra, you're talking a whole host of, you like Stanford Research Institute, CIA, Department of Defense, I think Aspen, maybe Asalin were involved in that as well. But yeah, there's really bringing out the sort of the mainstreaming of conspiracy culture. And as you say, I think the 80s films like E.T., where we saw NASA try to take over the show, were the sort of the first period or genre where these three-letter agencies were sort of brought into the mainstream consciousness as something ominous, I suppose.
Oh yeah. Do you have anything to say about that, Pearse? Those evil feds.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've seen this. I guess I don't think Stranger Things is like a kids show, even though it features kids. But it is interesting that this is like something Tom and I have noticed in a lot of these like assisted films, and I don't think there's anything. I don't think anybody from the government was involved in this, but just the notion that they don't even really say. I mean, they mention the CIA. They oddly mention the NSA, which
Oh,
I
that's
can't
right. They do,
really
yeah.
imagine that anybody in the 80s even knew what that was. I mean, there were like mentions of it, I think, or alluded to in the Watergate hearings, but I mean, the NSA was like one of those things like people were like denying it existed like 10 years ago. So I don't know why some drunken cop would mention it. It's always Hooper that mentions it. But what's funny is that they're really explicit about that this is like the deep state. This is like this amorphous group of, I suppose, federal. I mean, who even knows with some of them? I mean, definitely the evil doctor whose name is escaping me. He seems like he's sort of off on his own thing, like he's like a private, he's like a regular doctor that is like contracted by the CIA, DOD, Department of Energy, whatever. But it is, there's no overt references to Washington. There's that woman who we see who kills the diner owner.
The diner guy, yeah.
Yeah, and she seems to be kind of above the doctor.
So... Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't even know who she answers to. But again, I think it's just a fascinating idea. And I can only assume that that's just the conspiracy culture kind of, melting into the mainstream. Obviously, with the whole MK Ultra is like a major point of this, although it's, I mean, with zero context, you would never see that even 5 years ago.
Well, I think, you're right. Excuse me. You wouldn't see anything. Well, I can't think of any very clear overt references to MK Ultra that have been older than, say, the last few years, because we have seen a few in recent years. We saw the film American Ultra, which I believe did actually specifically mention MK Ultra, and I think there's been one or two examples. But apart from that, it's not something that's really come up in the mainstream in that way. But in regard to the sort of the structure of these projects and operations and who's working for who, I think that what they're trying to evoke there with these mysterious people, these kind of psychopathic minions, as it were, is just the whole like Men in Black kind of motif.
Yeah.
Because I mean that is a real kind of motif. It's a concept. It's something that was reported, I think, as early as the 1940s in relation to UFO events and stuff like that. And now I don't necessarily buy into that stuff per se, but it is something that's been recorded over and over again, or at least observed. Is that when we have strange events, paranormal events, things that can't be explained, you have these guys who. Nobody knows who they work for. They won't say which agency they're with. They dress in black. They don't mess around. These kind of groups and types. So I think it was just evoking that spooky kind of ominous government presence. Dressed in black.
It also ties back into UFO culture and with all that sort of. Fringe area too, not just conspiracy, but that angle of conspiracy too. So then you've got the 11 character very much in on that, with doing the remote viewing experiments. They throw her in the sensory deprivation tank and make her go into the astral plane or wherever she's at to get secrets from the Russians. And that's maybe the only sort of like reference to any sort of like the state doing what it does, collecting intelligence for war and things like that. I mean, that was a direct reference to that. But other than that, you don't really get anything.
Yeah, that was the remote viewing thing. I mean, again, real world time. Not overt, that they don't hammer home, as you say. It's really a few kind of scenes in the movie that allude to what's actually going on there. Most of it's flashbacks and that kind of thing. But this is talking, I think, really about Project Stargate. And so that was another one of these kind of joint programs run under CIA and DOD on remote viewing. So this was remote viewing was a genuine, authentic research program for the military-industrial complex through the 80s, right up until the mid-90s, I believe. And so it was all about the Cold War surveillance idea. This ties in, of course, to the the whole United Earth Army sort of wacky Cold War intelligence experiment thing. And I know that you guys, you and Tom Pearse, actually reviewed The Men Who Stare at Goats, the film with Jay Dyer. So people should check that out. But this is all real stuff. Project.
They should check out. You reviewed American Ultra with us, so.
Yeah, check that out too. That was part of the same series. Yeah. So
it's definitely.
I think they're actually 10 and 11. I think they come right after one another, if I'm not mistaken. So
you know what's something that sort of struck me with the issue of MK Ultra is, I mean, apparently now it's totally okay to talk about MK Ultra. Obviously, there were references to. I'll say there were one of my favorite TV shows, Archer. Which is an animated show about espionage. They've talked about Operation Gladio. They did a whole season about Iran-Contra. But they've actually done 2 episodes, one mentioning MK Ultra and then another one revolving around MK Ultra before this happened. But it's an obscure TV show, you know, who's really the people watching that are already aware of it. But apparently now it's, you know, this is for the mass media. This is for everybody, the public, so it's okay to mention MK Ultra. But what I found really interesting was that, first off, they say that nobody was forced into this program. You know, we meet who's probably Eleven's Elle's mother, this woman Terry Ives, who's, you know, she's like catatonic after having taken all this LSD, and her sister says, well, nobody forced her. You know, she did it on her own volition. They do mention that it goes back to the 50s, but there's very little context. And apparently it was all to unleash, you know, psychic powers and the paranormal, which is a bizarre concept. So it's like they're admitting that MK Ultra was real, and then they use another sort of, I would assume, side project of MK Ultra, things like remote viewing and spoon bending and stuff like that, which seems so outlandish. You know, who's going to believe that? And, you know, that's what it's about. Oh, so it's all kind of phony baloney, because nobody really has psychic powers. So they're admitting to 2 and again, the remote viewing is real. They're, I assume, still doing it to this day. And they apparently get actionable intelligence off of it. Yet they're using that to it's like they're using that to dispel MK Ultra and that program at the same time, because nobody's going to watch this and be like, oh wait, what? The CIA was actually, you know, drugging people to unleash the Demogorgon. You know, so they're able to take these 2 things and, while admitting that they're real, making them completely ridiculous.
Well, this is something that we've talked about. All of us, I think, have talked about on many occasions. Actually, is the possible counterintelligence methodology or applications of shows like this, where you do get a mainstream show that is very popular, that's, you know, being produced to be very popular, and it contains all of these real world references to, you know, real government programs, real conspiracies, but mixes it up with fantasy, you know, with fantasy elements, with the paranormal, with wacky supernatural goings on. And so it's like you're alluding to, Pearse, you know, the average person who doesn't really know a lot about these issues and who hasn't really done a lot of research is going to watch a show like this and is going to pigeonhole all of those terms and those associations into the realm of fantasy. So, okay, you know, these things might have happened, but it's all ridiculous. It's you know, there's nothing to see. And so whether or not that was the intention with the show, and I don't necessarily think it is, because I haven't really been able to get much information at all on the background of the show or the people behind it. But it still kind of has that effect in a lot of ways, I think.
Well, apparently they wanted to remake the Stephen King movie.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then they couldn't. Right. So, I mean, and this movie is like riddled with Stephen King references, like left and right. But obviously they're aware of conspiracy culture. They're aware that MK Ultra is real. You know, maybe they're just sort of, this was it. But I mean, they have references to JFK. In the there's that one where with the body. Where the troopers come in, and you know, it's a pretty, I think, real reference.
Pretty clear. Yeah. I got that. Definitely got that.
Yeah. And also the idea that, they're bugging people's home. I mean, this was something. Do you think that everybody was bugged? You know, like, they're definitely listening on everyone's telephones. Because they show these rooms where they're doing that.
Yeah.
But then they also bug Hopper's house. But I was wondering, is everyone bugged? And, I don't even know why they let him go. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think what that speaks to is the fantasy element and of this genre and of this show, because again, I think we're supposed to suspend our disbelief when we watch these things, because so much of it doesn't make sense. So much of it is in no way at all plausible. You know, but you know, it seems that from what you're saying and from what I remember that. Most of the people involved. So Will Byers' mother, I think her house was bugged. I think that was revealed at some point later on in the series where she said something about, I think she might have been doing that thing where, so Will is being held in the underworld by the Demogorgon, you know, and she is somehow able to speak with him through the telephone line. So he's able to communicate through electricity, through power. And that kind of ties into a whole kind of quantum physics theory on dimensions and stuff like that. But anyway, they're able to apparently communicate with each other, you know, through electricity and power. And I think, from memory, she has some kind of contact with him, and then that is picked up on by these whoever it is, the NSA or the people who are listening to the calls. And as we know, the sheriff's name. What's his name again? Is it Hooper?
Hopper.
Is that right? Hopper, yeah. He tries to break into the facility, and they capture him and drug him and send him back home. Try and make him think that he's just taken too many prescription drugs. But he wakes up the next morning and goes, "Oh wow, what's happened here?" And he finds a bug in his house. And I think from what we can see anyway, it looks like the main people who are involved in the sort of the story are bugged. So, yeah.
Well, I also had another just quick conspiratorial one, but I thought that his deputies were in on it, or that they were working for Dr. Brenner. And I don't know if that's just my own crazy, but they're constantly trying to dissuade him from doing. I mean, and it's sort of like when him and one of his deputies are researching MK Ultra, and it's like, okay, obviously it's kind of crazy and far-fetched, but they've just returned from the research facility where they definitely lied. They showed them phony footage, of the night that Elle escapes, but it's not raining, even though it was raining. And then they see, then it's, and Brenner was part of this CIA mind control program. And then what is his lieutenant is like, I think that's silly, let's not go there. And it is like, come on, it's right there.
Well, that is strange. I kind of got a couple of different thoughts on that. I think there's a kind of an archetype, game being played in this show to do with gender archetypes, and we can get into that a bit later on. But I think what they're perhaps trying to get across with the two sort of deputies or whatever they are, superintendents, who are very aloof, very they're basically presented as being completely incompetent and stupid, is that these people represent mainstream middle America in some way, and when presented with information on a possible conspiracy, their immediate response is to essentially just dismiss it and make a joke out of it. So I think in a way they could be sort of just playing the role of the average mainstream American skeptic or something like that, because as you say, when he's showing them information about MK Ultra, he goes to the microfiche at the library and looks up all this stuff on Dr. Brenner and the history of MK Ultra, and he's showing them like newspaper articles, and they're just like,
I think that's a stretch, Captain.
Idiots, like the Beavis and Butthead, But
I think this series it does a good job at making you, or presenting a lot of blanks that you, the audience, can fill in like this. You know what I mean? And again, like, there's a lot of mystery. Like, well, these characters are acting weird. Why are they doing it? The show never tells you, but it it gives you lots of reasons to believe all sorts of different ideas. And I don't know what to say other than that, but it does a good job of that.
Yeah, I think that's true. There are plenty of gaps left in the plot. And again, I think that what I was saying before about suspending your disbelief is part of it. But as you say, Aaron, this could be more a case of just not wanting to drag the audience to a singular conclusion on absolutely every topic, and perhaps letting you make up your own mind.
And I guess that lends itself to the conspiracy side too, because with conspiracy, you're always digging for more information, but you never have the complete amount, so you have to fill in gaps. So it sort of plays to that sort of whatever it is. I don't know, investigating the conspiracy. That's what you do.
It reminds me of how David Lynch does his films, and this actually, to me, there are echoes of Twin Peaks in it. Now I haven't seen Twin Peaks in quite a while, but from my memory, there are small town Middle America, sort of the seedy, the dark, ominous underbelly of what's happening. Ritual, murder, kidnapping, all these types of elements. So I was feeling a bit of Lynch in this particular series, and I think that when we talk about the gaps and the aspects of the plot that you are left to make up your own conclusions on, I think that could be, perhaps some influence from Lynch there as well.
I think that's also the nature of these binge shows, is that, this isn't even a TV show. This is an 8-hour movie. Nobody watched like one episode and, I think I'm done. Or I'll wait until next week to watch that. Everybody is watching this in like a day or two. So, and it all kind of blurs together where, like when I rewatched it, I forgot all sorts of little tiny things. And, so I think it also lends itself to, it doesn't have to be the most solidly written TV show, because even with the plot holes,
keep you interested,
whatever. Because I'm just going to go to the next episode anyway. I don't really care, and it's all about I gotta know, and you get that that sort of endorphin rush again when you quote wake up in the conspiracy culture, and you find out this this hidden knowledge, and it elevates you or whatever. The same thing like with these binge shows where you have to know the next. Like I had to stop myself from like looking up things online where it's like, I'll friggin' watch it right now.
I know what you're saying. I think what it reminded me of a lot in a ways is, and this ties back into the stylized kind of graphics, is a book, because each episode is actually marked as a chapter. And at the beginning of each episode, you're given these graphics on the screen, and they look like a Stephen, look like the graphics from a Stephen King book, or some kind of high-paced 80s horror book or something like that. Because I used to read things like this when I was a kid, and this reminded me very much of like reading a horror book where it didn't have to make sense because it was exciting, and you were just going to keep turning the page, and it was just going to keep getting more exciting. So it's fun, and I think that's what it's meant to be. But more nostalgia, more appeal.
What about just the fact that everybody was talking about this? Like, what's the significance of this? Do we think is it was that what the intent was here, and was that what some of the ideas may have been thrown in there for, or what? What do you think, Pearse?
I actually think that at its core, I think that obviously nothing gets made without a bunch of marketing executives and the owners or the execs at Netflix saying, "Well, is this going to make us money?" And obviously they succeeded quite well. But I think at the core, the reason that everybody was talking about it was because at its heart, it's just a really great emotional primal story, where everybody is, and all the actors are great. I mean, the kids are phenomenal. Every single one of them. I personally love Winona Ryder, so I'd see any. And again, talk about nostalgia in the '80s and stuff, Heather and all those sort of things. But I think that all the characters are archetypes of the '80s, but with a twist. So you get the nerd, the popular kid. There's the bully. And then they flesh that out, as you were saying, Adam. There's like the sort of the idiot cops who maybe represent middle America or people that just don't question things. But they're done with such sincerity and realness. And then again, too, it is an archetypal story of good versus evil, literally light and dark, love and betrayal, redemption. So I think for all of the pop, that's why I think the pop culture stuff is irrelevant, especially if you watch it again, because really it's just debate. Yeah, I mean, this is a story that's been told, since before the Greeks and the and all these. This is just like an ancient story that is also littered with lots of occult and esoteric references and things. Like, I know L is reference to some like ancient god. Yeah, and there's a lot of other things.
It means God. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think that's why people were talking. And it's funny, I don't think that people realize that, like we've become, as a society, we've like moved to this where, I'm sure you guys have heard this, but like you're at a bar with friends and it's just everybody is, oh, did you see this? Have you seen that show? And then you talk about how great the show is for 10 minutes, and then it's, yeah, well, but have you seen this show yet? Oh, you haven't? Oh, let me tell you about it. But we're obsessed with that. We're obsessed with consuming. And again, nobody can sit down to watch a movie, but they'll watch 8 hours of a TV show in one sitting. But I think that you scratch past all of that. This show in particular is this primal emotional story with really great acting. I think that's really. I know a lot of people, and maybe I'm I don't know, missing it, but I know a lot of people sort of talked about all of the reasons behind why this is so popular, and it did sort of like happen overnight. But I think that's really why. It's because it's a great story that's a story that will be told till the end of time.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. That there's always got to be that fundamental basis to keep people watching. Again, as you say, you've got the story of good versus evil, of light versus dark. You've got the overworld versus the underworld. You've got L representing the god or goddess archetype, who's in the overworld, and you've got the demigorgon on the underworld. They kind of are different sides of the same coin, and kind of eventually do battle in the end. So this is a timeless epic, as you say, which has been told over and over and over again, and a myriad of different iterations and versions over since the start of human history. But I think that as we alluded to a number of times already, the bait, really, the way they get you to buy into this story is with the nostalgia, with the pop culture references, with things like the graphics, with the art decoration and all the props and all that kind of stuff. And as to whether a show like this would be so popular had it not been, referencing and paying homage to all of these 80s films, and had it not tapped into the sort of nostalgia and that novelty factor, I don't know as to whether it would be so popular. But, I think that it was definitely an exercise in target marketing, and we've discussed this, running up to in the lead up to this podcast. We've talked about this a little bit, but I think this is something that's really worthy of continued observation. Is the fact that we now have companies like YouTube, companies like Netflix, Amazon, and I think there's a few other smaller ones out there who are now getting involved in making and producing, or at least financing and distributing their own content. And I think when they're involved in that kind of a platform, if you will, doing it online in the way that they're doing it, I think that allows them to sort of to target market and to tailor produce a lot of their content a lot more accurately, in terms of they know the demographics they're watching, they know about what people are searching for on YouTube.
They've got all the analytics and data.
The analytics exactly.
Built into their platform. That's what their platform allows. They're like, okay, let's use this to give them what they want.
This is so absolutely right. This is a show which looks to have been based on metadata. I mean, one thing. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, one thing that we all discussed previously was the fact that we had all come into awareness of the show at basically the same time. So my story was that I had seen the advertisement on YouTube. So you get your video, your advertisements on your YouTube videos. This thing kept popping up over and over and over again. Stranger Things, and I didn't really pay any attention to it because I generally don't watch a lot of TV at all. But then I saw that Jay Dyer from Jay's Analysis had done a brief review of it on his website, and I thought, okay, check it out. Then looked interesting enough, and so I decided to watch it. And then simultaneously, I suggested it to Aaron. Aaron tells me that actually his wife has just talked him into watching it. We decided to do a review of it. We talked to Pearse. Pearse gets back to us and suggests that we do Stranger Things. So all three of us at pretty much the same week came into awareness of the show, watched the show, and got in touch with one another to suggest a review of it. And so what this leads me to believe is that because this show is touching on so much nostalgia and provoking, these sentimental feelings of childhood, of innocence, is that people like us who are in our 30s, our kind of metadata or what have you, our search history, all this kind of kind of surveillance data that we produce using the internet is being used to target market this kind of stuff. So I think this show has actually been made for children of the 80s, 30-somethings of our age, who are now adults and who are now at least broadly familiar with conspiracy culture and that kind of thing, because all of us will be searching for, sort of broadly similar topics on YouTube, looking at things, conspiracies, MK Ultra, this kind of thing. So
Zeitgeist is available on Netflix. It has been for as long as I can remember. Yeah.
Probably a Netflix original.
Oh man. There's something I was going to say. I totally forget.
That's all right. I mean, I just think that is interesting, and I think that we should keep watching this because I mean, it's like we discussed the other day, Pearse. I sometimes just go through a phase when I look up like 80s pop music on YouTube and listen to that kind of thing.
That's the only music I listen to, really. I mean,
well, there you go. Exactly. And so does Aaron.
Again, a lot of I listen to a lot of Italo disco, so that's all. But yeah, I mean, what's scary is when it's like a YouTube original movie. When that comes out, because I mean that's just a matter of time. I mean, all of these big Silicon Valley companies are branching out into Amazon is trying to become the I think might succeed where Google has failed. In terms of, in
terms of everything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
not just film production, but things like delivering groceries to your door. They're doing them and Google are in direct competition with all that stuff. It's crazy.
Oh, I
mean, anything you can think of.
I was saying the last time we talked. I mean, I wake up every morning to a Amazon Washington Post email, all about the top trending stories. And I am guilty of it. I look at it, it's, and I'm sure, and they're controlling the news, they're controlling media, they're controlling food and, clothing that you buy. And, so yeah, I mean, it's wild again too. I mean, it's just that scary. Like, is that really what we want as a society? It's like on one hand, it's like the CIA and the Pentagon, making mostly Hollywood films, and then on the other hand, you have these corporations churning out, TV shows based on what clicks and metadata and what people are watching I mean, obviously people at Netflix must have seen that. Well, 80s movies are the most popular.
Oh yeah. I think
this is exactly what's happening. I think what we're
Sorry. No. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say. I think what we're seeing now, with, as you say, the expansion of the production of film into things like areas like Silicon Valley, is the target marketing of culture. Because as we say before, we have like the Pentagon, CIA, various other government agencies sponsoring these kind of big blockbuster mainstream films, usually about war or historical events, and they're meant for as wide an audience as possible. And so that will come across in the actual content. But when we look at things like this, again, it's it's like the same kind of production sort of studio groups or that kind of arena saying, well, how can we how can we target market our content and sort of revive our industry, in the digital age? And I think, the solution has been to get Silicon Valley involved. So, we've got these Silicon Valley companies now using the analytics, the metadata, all this kind of stuff to literally, start creating culture that is actually target marketed to, very specific niches. So, age groups and interests and all that kind of stuff. Because if you look at the kind of cross section of what's popular in terms of TV, and all the kind of the themes and ideas that are present within those, I think what you're looking at is a pretty accurate, actually, sort of cross section of cultural demographics. And I think what we're seeing here is just one particular niche in that kind of emerging trend, if you will.
Yeah, and I'm guessing I'm right too, that the main age group that is subscribed to Netflix is the one who are the children of the 80s. You know what I mean? Again, I don't know. Is that true?
That. Well, not just that, but I think not just that, but the producers of the show and the people who are working at places like Netflix, Amazon, Google, YouTube, all these. I mean, I think the people who are the movers and shakers and in those industries will be people who are in their 30s, and I think they are making shows that they themselves would want to see as well. Yeah. I think that's probably a part of it. I mean, if we talk about nerd culture, Dungeons and Dragons, kids of the 80s, sort of a passing interest in conspiratorial topics, if you will. I think these probably represent, in many ways at least, the interests of the people who are actually working at these companies too.
If I could just throw something kind of, maybe it's a little out there, but I also felt that along with all of that, seeing, marketing this towards people, I think there's also that's the one sort of other odd thing I found is that there is this sort of underlying Cold War paranoia throughout the show. And I don't think it's not overt. It's very subtle, but it's very effective. So there is obviously, there's sort of references to, well, this is to fight the Russians. Obviously, L is spying on the Russians. But I found Lucas, who's one of the main kids, he has this like complete distrust of 11. Always. And he even calls her a traitor, which is, again, evoking that Cold War 80... it doesn't have to be the 80s, because I think we're reaching another phase of the Cold War right now with, with Russia and Iran and all of these, Putin is going to take over and destroy us, and he's in league with Trump, and, only, the neocons and Hillary Clinton can save us. So we're back to this, we're on the brink of World War III. And I found that to be interesting, and I think that I wonder. I don't think that was something. I think that's again they're picking up on trends and they're understanding that people are, for better or worse, talking about that all the time. You can't escape it. There is this constant. People have upped the sort of rhetoric against Russia and vice versa, and then also the other. Weird little, again, his geopolitical historical thing is there's one of the other few things that sort of dates this is like it's a period piece is when 11 is like at home in Mike's house and she's watching TV. There's a 2-second, you just hear the audio, but it's Ronald Reagan talking about Syria occupying Lebanon, and that just sort of jumped out at me again of all the things they're going to put in here. It's Syria occupying Lebanon. So again, putting us back into that mindset. Syria's bad. You better watch out for them. So I just found that to be interesting, and I wonder if that, because they could have done this in the 70s, right? I mean, why the 80s? Why the Cold War? Why include Syria? So I don't know if that's, maybe I'm kind of going off on something, but I found that to be interesting, and I wonder if that has a relation.
You made me just think of something there too, is that all the historical, it's a period piece, and all the actual historical or political events are so minor. There's like so few of them. you can't tell. You can barely even tell it's a period piece from them, or you know that's so few and far between. It doesn't hold the period as you're viewing it. What does the most is these little pop cultural things, like the things hanging on Will Byers' wall, like the movie posters. He's listening to, like this or that music. There's a lot of pop culture stuff. The D&D they're playing. Even the silly little walkie-talkies they have, it reminds you of that's a product. It reminds you of this product you had when you're a kid when you're in the 80s, and that's kind of just playing on what makes something a period piece for the average person. It's, you remember all the stuff that was on I Love the 80s on VH1, remember these toys and remember this cartoon show and this movie? Like, you don't remember, and then there was Reagan was talking about Syria and this, there's no mention of geopolitics in that. The thing that brings the nostalgia and brings a period piece really to life for the average person who is on Netflix is the Evil Dead poster on the wall or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I just wonder if the geopolitics things aren't. I don't think that's about nostalgia. I think that's sort of about informing us right now. And I think I think that for me at least, those sort of things kind of brought, because realistically you couldn't do this show set in today. If it was set in 2016, all these kids would have cell phones. They wouldn't have to worry about communicating, or there'd be pictures of the Demogorgon, and it would be on YouTube later that day. So obviously it would just be lame. But yeah, I don't know. The Cold War thing and the whole that 11 is the traitor and she's the other. That we can't trust her. I don't know. For me, that just sort of evoked a very current mindset right now, which is maybe a mindset that is always there. It never really goes away.
Okay, so we've had a few more technical issues there, unfortunately, but we're going to try and wrap things up a bit now. I think we've talked about this a bit, and there are plenty of little details and things which we could go around forever. But I would recommend this. I think it's fun. I think it's more sentimentality and nostalgia and kind of innocent fun than anything else. But of course, as we said, there are plenty of little references to real-world geopolitical, governmental issues. And it looks as if the series is going to be rebooted for a second season, because the first season wraps up with Will Byers gets rescued from the underworld with the help of Elle, the girl with special powers. They manage to evade this team of government agents, and they kill the Demogorgon as well. However, the girl Elle, she destroys herself in destroying the Demogorgon. So it's basically a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of the series, indicating that there is more to be told, and that there are more mysteries to be solved. But one other thing I just wanted to touch on before we finish up today was that the archetypical dynamics within the series are quite interesting, and that we're presented with 1980s middle America. People have sort of fairly working class to middle class in terms of the demographics there. And one thing I noticed is there's I suppose what you might call the gender roles and gender archetypes. One thing we've seen a lot in the past few decades is the kind of denigration or the undermining of the kind of the strong male father figure. And we don't really see one in a conventional sense within this film, or this series rather. We do have the cop who he's got his own problems, alcohol, etc., depression, it seems, but he takes a pretty authoritative role. But apart from him, the only other sort of authority figures are other government agents. So the cop and the government agents are the only authoritative kind of, I guess, masculine archetype sort of figures. Everybody else, they are a single parent household, or a household in which the mother wears the pants. And I'm not sure whether this is an accurate representation of 1980s demographics, but more a representation of present day demographics and archetypes, etc. Did you guys pick up on any of that at all?
I just picked up on the lack of parental figures, really. Even Hooper, the cop. I think this is like a point I'm so not sure on, but he basically sells out 11. He tells the government where she is. Now the show ends with the sort of he's giving her food. He's leaving food for her, so she must still be alive or something. But I didn't even.
Yeah, it
really
redeems him somewhat. Yeah.
But I didn't even.
That's
see
what's
him
meant to
as
do.
a father figure. I felt like there were no, it was like the kids.
Yeah, to me, it brings back the 80s films where it's just a bunch of kids and, forget the adults. It's all about what the kids do. And when the kids are together, it's not about the adults being around anyway. And for me, that's mainly what's going on there. It's like, oh, yeah, this is what kids do. It's a kid's adventure. It makes the adults watching remember being kids. So, I don't know.
Well, I think that kind of ties into what I was talking about because, as you say, with so many of these films, the Goonies, E.T., etc., there is a complete lack of parental oversight. And so these kids are getting up to no good and doing things which are completely dangerous and illegal and traumatic and all the rest of it. And the parents are just kind of completely absent doing their own thing. But, if I was to take a traditional stance on that particular dynamic, it would appear that this is somehow related to the lack of a kind of fatherly male presence in their lives. The fact that there's more females than males. There's sort of a lack of oversight is something you'd, I guess, generally sort of connect with like a single parent household or something like that. So whether or not that is the case,
I would say that those trends in society were growing in the 80s too. Latchkey children, rising divorce rates, things like that. That was coming to prominence, or these are the issues that were really starting to affect society. I feel like in the 80s, that's when things started to happen along those lines. And so that brings back the nostalgia factor too. Is like, hey, yeah, I had a depressing childhood where my parents weren't around, and I had to escape in these movies, and these kids, all that. You know what I mean?
Well, that kind of was the standard that was being put across in all these films. Was the latchkey children? If we talk all these films that we talked about, feature latchkey children going on an adventure, and I think, it's you could ask the question as to, well, what were these films, influencing society in that way? I know that Steven Spielberg, for example, he in all of his films, he will present a single parent household, usually a single mother, and he has said in interviews that this is because his parents got divorced. Now, I don't find that explanation particularly convincing, but it's something that he stuck with and continues to stick with. And so, the question of whether this is a real reflection or whether this is something that was guiding cultural norms in some way, I guess is up for grabs. But I think the extreme that we see in this show, where the Will by his father is a complete deadbeat alcoholic womanizer, and the only other kind of functional father is completely kind of absent and permissive, is it's certainly interesting, and it's maybe more relevant to today than it might have been in the 1980s. But again, maybe you guys didn't see it in exactly the same way I did, but that certainly popped up to me.
Yeah. I don't know. Kids just born and raised in such a way. Now they're old. Now they're watching films and series about it, which kind of evoke that memory. I don't know. I don't know quite what to say about that. But the truth is that those children from the 80s are adults now. And what has been the true effect of that? We're living it now. Well, we don't fully even know because we're living it right now.
Well, I think these things are blended, and I think just to sort of finish up here, I think these two, elements in terms of what people see and what people do are blended, and along with memory as well. Because when we think about our memories of the 80s, they are so heavily influenced by these idealized movies and music videos, and I think memory and culture, can be conflated very, very easily. And I think that the way that we remember something is going to be, it's going to be heavily influenced by the way that we are told it was, through culture. And I think that this is going on a number of levels, in Stranger Things. And I think to a degree, it's almost mythologizing us, which is, a very powerful kind of a technique of creating that sort of sentimentality.
Yeah. Hyper reality. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to the conversation, Pearse, or anything?
I guess just call little things just on what you guys were just saying. I think that the kids, while they didn't have parental figures, I think their friendship represented sort of positive growing, and they're they solve their own problems. They don't need adults to solve their problems. Like when they're fighting, it's, okay, I hit you first, so I'm going to be the bigger man and I'm going to apologize. And they have this real like moral code, which I found, which is again sort of harkens back to movies of all. It doesn't have to be the 80s. It could be any sort of movie. But I found that I think that's an interesting idea. Again, in a society where we, kids are growing up, unfortunately, faster and faster. But I think that this is, and again, too, the nerd culture is very open-minded, and very it can be very caring, and I think they come across like that. But no, I think just I really did love the show. I'm very excited for season 2. I loved, as I said, I love the acting. I love Winona Ryder. I can't wait to see what happens to Steve. I hope that Nancy dumps him. I could not stand Steve or his friends.
There we go.
I miss Barb. I didn't think that Barbara deserved to die in such a horrific way.
No. Yeah, that was a bummer how they just killed her off like that.
Me and my girlfriend were big fans of Barb, and we kept thinking that 11 was going to find her or something. But no, I think it's a great show, and just I guess closing off on the nostalgia. I loved in I think it's in episode 4, The Body, when they play Atmosphere by Joy Division. It's an amazing song and definitely brings me back to high school. And I just, it's also just, it's great in a film as well. But yeah, or in a TV show. But and also just thanks for having me on. I know this was probably one of the more difficult episodes for all three of us. But thanks for, and not in a bad way. I think the content is great, but this was a bit of upside down, the upside down for Aaron and Adam and I in recording this. And I guess am I right in saying I'm the first guest on Themes and Memes?
No, we've actually had Tom Ticker on a few months ago.
Second. Yeah.
So then, right. So I'll just be the worst guest, and then it can only get better from this for recording. Yeah. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, it was great to have you on. I mean, again, I think we could go on and on forever about all the little nuggets and little themes that we've noticed in this, but because there are so many. But I think the most interesting thing to take away from this is that it seems to have been tailor-made for our particular demographic and target marketed to a particular demographic, namely people like us, and that this is probably a trend that we're going to see evolve more and more, in the coming years. And so it's going to be very, very interesting to see what new type of content comes out. For joining me, Aaron, and thank you again for joining me, for Pearse. It's been an interesting conversation, and you can check out Pearse's podcast, Porkins Policy Review, at PorkinsPolicyReview.com. Is that right?
Yeah, it's PorkinsPolicyReview.com, and it's actually now it's not even a podcast; it's a radio show on American Freedom Radio, and you can listen to it live 4 to 6 Eastern or 1 to 3 Pacific on AmericanFreedomRadio.com, but it's also all on my, everything is on my website, PorkinsPolicyReview.com.
Cool. And you can get everything you want from Themes and Memes on tmpodcast.com. You can get the RSS podcast feed on iTunes, on Stitcher Radio, on TuneIn, and on Google Play.
And you better follow our Twitter, too. That's real important.
Oh, we're on Twitter as well. Themes Memes.
We're Twittering.
Yep, our Twitter handle is Themes Memes, so you can get us on there as well. And we're going to be back next month with another special guest. We're going to be having Jay Dyer on to talk about the film Imperium. So that actually will be done very, very shortly, within the next few days, so people can tune in again, catch that one. This podcast was recorded on the 24th of August, 2016.